of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Recently, a friend of mine texted me a meme about Christianity. It showed a 1950s man walking beside Jesus and pleading, "Please, Jesus, protect me from your followers." A similar sentiment was explored in an article the friend also linked. It asserted that the younger generations are leaving the church not because they do not wish to follow Christ's teachings, but because people in the church do not follow them. I suspect this is partly true. Brought up in a culture saturated by advertising, the younger generations are keenly aware of manipulation through messaging. They have a much more heightened awareness of internal contradictions, unlike the generation before them, and are willing to point them out. I once heard a report about a mid-century woman who was given the wrong baby at the hospital. She suspected as much, but since the baby weighed 2 pounds less than the one to which she had given birth, but she said nothing because she did not want to embarrass the doctor. A couple of decades later, the two misidentified children met each other at a party and began to unravel the whole story when they each noticed how much they resembled the other one's family in looks and personality. One family was blonde and outgoing, the other was dark-haired and severe. People roughly from my generation onward are increasingly likely to inquire, to doubt, to question. Though we like to blame the decline of the church on materialism, I suspect that a role is also played by the internal contradictions of the Christian message, at least as most know it. Specifically, we say that God is love, gracious, all-powerful, and forgiving, but a seeming majority of Christians tell a story that is utterly without love, grace, power, or forgiveness. Now, as I summarize this story, I'll refer to God as He for clarity's sake, otherwise it gets a bit confusing. They say that there was only one way for God, the all-powerful creator of all that is, to prevent the people He created and loved from going eternally to a tortuous hell that God Himself also created. The one way was to send God's Son, whom He loved, to earth and torture Him to death, to pay a cosmic debt owed to God Himself in a system of punitive accounting that, again, God Himself created. Such a God lacks power, originality, grace, forgiveness, and love. Simply put, it is a God who has to hurt in order to heal. This story, in turn, justifies God's followers practicing spiritual sadism. That is, backstabbing, misrepresenting, gossiping, triangulating, manipulating for the sake of some good cause. I mean, if it was good enough for God, it's good enough for us, right? We feel justified in our various punitive measures and come to believe they are the only way to make things better. In addition, we also see people torturing themselves in acts of spiritual masochism. But no matter how long we fast, it does not help one bit someone who has food insecurity down the road in Brunswick County. In fact, I think it is somewhat insulting that a person with plenty would voluntarily go hungry for the sake of God when others have no choice. An exception would be when the fasting person gave the food she forwent to someone less fortunate. Similarly, when we lash ourselves, we mock those who are enslaved or imprisoned and are lashed against their will. The story many Christians tell is wrong. God did not crucify Christ. Power-hungry hypocrites did. And we align ourselves with them each time we proclaim that it was necessary for Christ to be tortured, humiliated, and murdered. It was perhaps inevitable, but not necessary. Sadomasochistic theology is hypocrisy. It encourages us in the paths of the very people who crucified Christ. In contrast with this story, what we actually read in the Bible is, little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. In truth and action. Nowhere does it say anything about torturing ourselves or others being a virtue. It does, however, mention laying down one's life for others. That is, it praises making necessary sacrifices out of love for others. Things done to protect others in ways that they would actually want to be protected. Christ modeled that for us. He did not hurt people to help them. And that is exactly why the Pharisees are incensed. That and the fact that Christ repeatedly calls them out for their own sadomasochistic theology of power. It is when the Pharisees are investigating Christ for the great offense of healing a blind man that Christ tells them, I am the good shepherd. The powerful nature of this rebuke is simply not evident in the translation. First of all, it loses the emphatic quality of the I am. Oops. In Greek, it's not necessary to say, I am. Normally one just says, am hungry, am Pharaoh, am here. Sort of the way we shorten I am to I'm. We drop the A, the Greeks drop the I. It's just am, Amy. But here in John's Gospel, the Greek literally says, I am, ego eimi. It is emphatic. In other words, Jesus is telling the Pharisees and others gathered, I am the good shepherd. Christ is claiming his gift, asserting his purpose, and implicitly saying, you Pharisees are not good shepherds. Then there is the word good, which does not begin to capture the meaning of the Greek word kalos, which is not merely good, it means beautiful, ideal, wonderful. I am the beautiful, ideal shepherd, Christ is saying. In other words, you guys are being ugly, as we say in the South. Torture is not a path to healing, though we may have to accept unpleasant realities, as did Christ, for the sake of love. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. John tells us this behavior is not just for Jesus. As he admonishes, he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. That is, we should be prepared to sacrifice for the spiritual well-being of others when necessary. But we do not hurl ourselves to the wolves for no reason. Incidentally, people influenced by sadomasochistic theology especially love to hurl the clergy to the wolves. You need to sacrifice, Father. People are right to point out that if God is love, it is hypocritical to assert that God tortures to heal, that we should torture to heal. Spiritual sadomasochism is the very thing that Christ rejected. If we are lifting others up when we are able, then we are on the right path. Imagine a world in which people do not hurt others or themselves under the guise of doing good. Much political rhetoric would fall flat. DOA. I challenge you, in fact, to evaluate political rhetoric in this manner. See how often it is asserted that we must hurt to heal. If we abandoned hurting to heal, we would readily switch from retributive to restorative justice. I read an article where a prison in South Carolina rescues cats and dogs from the local shelter. The inmates then rehabilitate and train them, and then the animals are adopted out. Fewer animals are killed, and the inmates develop a sense of pride and purpose that in turn rehabilitates them. We would not buy the excuses of those who destroy our planet for personal profit. In fact, we would alter our relationship to the environment in general. Francis Bacon, the last man to claim that he knew all knowledge, held that we must vex nature in order to dominate it. And that vexing, that torture, has set us on a path to destruction. Transgender people would be a non-issue. All of existence would feel lighter if we set aside our tools of self-torture and other torture. People leave the church not because they disagree with Jesus, but because we misrepresent Jesus. Beware of those who claim that they are torturing to heal. Only love heals in truth and action. Amen.